Welcome on board, Chosen One. You didn't just survive the war, you ended it, quietly, powerfully, and now, the silence they sit in is the loudest punishment they'll ever hear. No explosions, no screaming, just that brutal, haunting realization. You were the one they couldn't control, outplay, or replace. When they laughed at your silence, they didn't realize silence is what a sniper needs before the final shot. When they called you dramatic for walking away, they didn't realize you were pulling the last move, the checkmate. Not loud, not messy, just final. Oh, the legend needs to bow now? Nah, the legend never bowed. The legend walked with their head up, peace intact, and a look in their eyes that said, "You'll regret this." And now, regret is the perfume they wear every damn day. Let's make one thing clear. They don't miss you. They're haunted by you. There's a difference. Missing someone feels warm. Being haunted feels cold, sharp, and inescapable. You're not a memory. You're a mirror they can't stop staring into because you exposed everything fake about them just by being real. If you're still with me, Chosen One, hit that like button and subscribe. Not for me, for us, for this army of silent giants who walked away like kings and queens and never looked back. See, people think you disappeared. That's cute. You didn't disappear. You just left the game after checkmate. You weren't trying to win a crowd. You were too busy outsmarting the player. While they were playing games, you were studying patterns. While they were mocking you, you were calculating. And now, they're stuck on a board you no longer play on. Psychologists say it's not the people who hurt you that haunt you. It's the ones who understood you and still walked away. That's you. You knew their weakness. You saw behind the fake confidence, and instead of using it against them, you just left. No clapbacks, no drama, just truth. That's what breaks people. That's why they're stuck. You know what's wild? They tried to bait you, gaslight you, belittle you, and every time you just stared back. Like, this all you got? That's villain energy, and villains don't explain themselves. Right now, they're in rooms telling edited stories about you, trying to make themselves the hero. But deep down, they know the truth. You were the one who held back. You were the one who didn't expose them. You were the one who walked away with receipts but chose peace instead. And that, Chosen One. That's why they can never forget you, because they know you could have ruined them. But instead, you let life do the job. Let's rewind for a second. Remember that time they thought you'd come back crawling, that you were too soft, too kind, too loyal to ever walk away for good? Now look at them, checking your profile in silence, asking about you without asking about you, lurking in shadows you no longer exist in. And you're not just healing, you're ascending. You're not just moving on, you're leveling up. You're not just forgotten, you're feared because they know you were real, and the world doesn't offer many of those. Let me drop a final truth bomb. Some people don't realize they had gold until their hands are full of dust, and now their pride's too loud to admit it. But their soul, it whispers your name every damn night. So when they can't sleep, when they avoid mirrors, when silence gets too loud, it's not guilt, it's you, still checkmating them without even trying. And before we go any deeper, listen closely. This isn't just a video, this is your moment. If you've ever felt like no one truly saw the moves you made in silence, the pain you carried like armor, the final checkmate you dropped without a single word, then you're exactly where you need to be. You're not here by accident. You're here because something inside you knows you left an impact they'll never recover from. And tonight, we break it all down, piece by piece, like the final puzzle they never solved. So here's the deal. If you're ready to own that power fully, drop BlackPawn777 in the comments right now. That's not just a number, that's a signal, a mark of the ones who didn't just walk away, they walked away victorious. Let the world see who the real players are. Let them know you're the storm that walked off the board and still controls the game. Because what's coming next? It's deeper, colder, and sharper than anything they ever expected. So grab your crown, buckle up, let's dissect the damage you did, one unforgettable move at a time. Let's begin. Number 1. You didn't just outsmart them, you humiliated their ego in silence. They thought they were the puppeteer until the strings snapped in their own hands. Let's get this straight. They thought they had you mapped out like a cheap maze, predictable, weak, a few steps ahead maybe, but not dangerous, not brilliant. They assumed you were a feeler, not a thinker, that you'd keep reacting, keep explaining, keep bending. What they didn't see coming was the moment you stopped speaking and started calculating. And that was the kill shot, because they were so busy trying to look smart. They never noticed you were watching everything. They thought they were 10 moves ahead, but they couldn't see past their own ego. They were performing, you were observing. Every eye roll they thought you didn't catch. Every guilt trip dressed up as love. Every manipulation they wrapped in fake apologies. You logged it all like a chess master planning the final move. And when you left, you didn't slam a door. You just walked off the board, leaving them frozen mid-game. That's not a breakup. That's an execution. And let's not pretend they're over it. No, they're still obsessing, still decoding, still gasping for that last word they never got. Because what you did wasn't loud, but it was final. A kind of finality that scars. You stripped them of their favorite illusion, that they were the one in control, that they were the clever one, the dominant one. But when it came down to it, they were just louder, not wiser. And now that illusion, shattered, pulverized, gone. They're stuck now. Every conversation feels like a lie because you exposed the real them without saying a word. They can't even enjoy their own narrative anymore because it unravels every time your silence echoes in their mind. They tell stories about you, but they stutter. They try to paint you as emotional or unstable. But the truth keeps bleeding through. The truth that you knew them better than they knew themselves, and that you walked away with a calm so unnerving it made all their fake confidence evaporate. And you know what's even funnier? They still don't understand how you pulled it off. That eats them alive, because narcissists need to feel smarter. They need to believe they're ahead. But you flipped the board and made the whole game irrelevant. That wasn't a step back. That was a mic drop. And ever since, they've been chasing shadows, trying to figure out how they lost to someone they thought was easy to beat. Here's the truth that haunts them. You didn't react. You adapted. You didn't rage. You studied. And when you moved, you didn't just win. You ended them in a way their pride will never recover from. That's not just intelligence. That's legendary. That's the kind of power that rewires people. And that's why they can't forget you. Don't underestimate what you did to them. This wasn't just an ending. This was a spiritual collapse of them, of their ego, of the character they played so confidently. You saw behind the curtain. You let them monologue. You watched them act. And then, when it was time, you vanished like a ghost that left fingerprints on everything they touch. Now, nothing feels clean to them. Every lie they tell has your silence stitched into it. You may ask yourself, why does this still matter? Because, chosen one, you need to understand your power. You were never the weak one. You were the truth, wrapped in patience, walking beside delusion until delusion revealed itself. And when you left, you didn't just leave them. You left the entire script they tried to trap you in. You refused to play the fool. You became the final plot twist. And that's unforgettable. Let's talk legacy for a second. Some people leave memories. You left a fracture in the mask they wore. You shattered the fantasy that they were always right. You proved that real intelligence doesn't need to brag. It just moves, and everything else collapses behind it. That's why they're haunted. Not by what you said, but by what you didn't. Not by what you did, but by what you saw and chose to walk away from without setting it on fire. Because that kind of quiet power, it's terrifying to fake people. You didn't just outsmart them, you undid them. You left them sitting in the ruins of their own ego, trying to rebuild a story that no longer works. And the irony, you never even had to raise your voice. That's villain energy. That's kingpin mindset. You didn't need to destroy them. They self-destructed, trying to figure out how you slipped through the cracks. So don't question your silence. Don't question your calm. Don't regret not clapping back. Your stillness was the sword. Your peace was the attack. And your exit, that was the final blow. They thought the loudest person wins, but the quiet one, the one who waits, observes, and strikes once, that's the one people remember forever. You were never a pawn. You were always the architect. And now their whole kingdom is a castle made of glass, shattered by the move they never saw coming. And trust me, they will never forget it. Number 2, you burned the blueprint. They built their ego on. They didn't lose you. They lost the version of you they could control, and that's a wound that never heals. Let's rip the mask off this lie. They never loved the real you. They loved the version they could manipulate, the agreeable one, the soft-spoken one, the over-apologizer, the one that bent so far backwards your spine should have cracked in half. That's the version they felt powerful around, the blueprint they drew their entire ego on. But you outgrew it, quietly, without permission, and now their empire is crumbling because you were the foundation the whole time. Imagine this. You build a castle on wet sand, decorate it with pride, call it a fortress. Then one day, the tide comes in, gently, without noise, just rise and wash. And suddenly, everything collapses. Because the ground you were stomping on was never yours to control. That's what happened to them the moment you evolved. They didn't just lose someone. They lost their leverage, their narrative, their illusion of dominance. And now they're staring at the rubble, trying to rebuild a throne with no subject. They needed you to stay small so they could feel big. You chose growth, and suddenly they shrank. Here's what they'll never admit. Their confidence wasn't self-made. It was borrowed. Borrowed from your silence, your kindness, your second chances. Every time they slipped up, you forgave them. And that gave them a false sense of superiority. They mistook your patience for permission, your love for weakness, your loyalty for blindness. But growth, growth doesn't ask for a damn thing. It just arrives, kicks the door open, and exposes everything. You didn't announce it. You didn't warn them. You just started seeing differently, thinking differently, moving differently. And they panicked, not because you left, but because they realized the version of you they needed no longer exists. That soft target, gone. That emotional cushion, gone. That person who explained themselves, overthought everything, and gave them chance after chance, dead and buried. And that's the version they can't replace. That's the ghost that haunts them. You didn't leave them empty-handed, you left them holding a mirror, and it's been shattering ever since. Now they try to reach out, test the waters, send out those pathetic breadcrumb texts like, "Hope you're good," or "I've been thinking." But the silence they get back, it's deafening because they're not texting you. They're texting the version of you that no longer picks up, the one who used to over-explain, the one who used to shrink themselves just to avoid conflict. But that version is gone, evolved, ascended, and untouchable. And here's the part they'll never say out loud. You were the blueprint for their confidence. They got to feel powerful because you dimmed your light around them. You didn't want to make them uncomfortable. You softened yourself just to keep the peace. But once you stopped doing that, they realized how average they really were. No mask left to hide behind, no weaker version of you to dominate, just you, in full strength, full clarity, and full control. Imagine walking into a room where you once controlled the lights. You knew every switch, every flicker. Then one day you walk in and nothing responds to you. No switches, no light. Just a reflection of who you used to be. And the sickening awareness that you no longer have access to what you once fed off of. That's the room they live in now. You may wonder, why does it still sting them? Why haven't they moved on? Because narcissists don't mourn love. They mourn control. And when you outgrew their tricks, they didn't lose a partner. They lost their source of power. That's the part they can't get back. That's the itch they'll never scratch. You didn't change the story. You walked off the page, and now the story doesn't make sense without you. They're rewriting history in their head right now, telling their friends you changed. You became cold, distant, different. But let's be real. You didn't change. You evolved. You leveled up. You got tired of babysitting their emotional immaturity while they called it love. And now that you're out, they're left explaining why the whole castle they bragged about is suddenly dust and silence. They'll stalk your success. They'll analyze your glow-up. They'll try to mimic the very energy they once mocked. But nothing hits harder than seeing the person you underestimated turn into the version you feared the most. Unbothered, unavailable, and unrecognizable. Metaphorically, you were the power outlet they kept plugging into. Now they're just waving their cord around in the dark, wondering why nothing's working, because the energy source is gone, and they were never self-powered to begin with. They underestimated the quiet ones, until the quiet one became the storm. They didn't lose love, they lost access, and now every person they meet gets compared to a version of you that no longer exists. They're chasing a ghost, one that won't respond, won't return, and definitely won't downgrade again just to make them feel big. So hold that line. Keep growing. Keep evolving. Because your growth is the one thing they can't copy, steal, or undo. It's the eternal reminder that their whole identity was built on your silence. And now that silence has turned into a roar they hear in their head every night. You didn't just outgrow them, you outgrew the lie they depended on. And that kind of truth, it burns forever. They wanted a puppet, but you became the puppeteer. And now the show's over, with no encore. Number 3, you let their own reflection ruin them. You never raised your voice, but your silence echoed their truth louder than any scream ever could. They expected fireworks, a scene, a meltdown, a long list of receipts, but you didn't flinch, you didn't warn, you didn't threaten, and you sure as hell didn't explain. You just stopped entertaining the circus and left the tent. That's what messed them up. You didn't need to expose their secrets. You let them expose themselves by simply existing in clarity. Imagine standing in front of a mirror that doesn't lie. No filters, no lighting tricks, just raw, ugly truth. That's what you became. Every boundary you placed was a spotlight. Every silence was a courtroom. Every time you didn't react, you forced them to sit with who they actually are, not who they pretend to be. They wanted to wear a mask, but you didn't snatch it off. You just stopped pretending you didn't see it. That quiet knowing in your eyes, it rattled them, because fake people survive off secrecy, off illusion, off perception. And you shattered all three without touching a single one. You didn't need revenge. You were the evidence, and that's what haunts them. You never told the world what they did because you didn't need to. They became a walking confession. Their guilt is the punishment. Your peace is the testimony. And their shame, that's the sentence they'll serve. In full. Number 4. You weren't dramatic. You were deadly accurate. They prepared for an emotional storm, but got a sniper shot instead. They thought you'd break, that you'd lash out, cry, chase, spiral, because that's how they've seen others collapse. But you didn't fall into the trap. You disarmed it, not by force, but with precision. Calm, focused, unapologetic. Every move you made was surgical, like a scalpel slicing through the lies. They expected chaos. What they got was strategy, and that's the part that shook them. Imagine this. They set the table for war, waited for screams, braced for drama, but instead, you walked in with nothing but stillness and facts. You dismantled their illusion with the kind of calm that feels like a ghost walking through a room. No sound, no warning, just presence. And once you were done, there was nothing left to argue, because when you're precise, you don't need to prove. You just act and let the silence haunt them. You weren't avoiding conflict. You were delivering justice in cold, calculated doses. They couldn't handle it, because people who survive on control need emotional chaos to keep their power alive. But you robbed them of that fuel. No tears, no theatrics, just a perfectly timed exit that made everything they built collapse on impact. And now, they're stuck playing a game you already won without ever raising your voice. Your calm was never weakness. It was the calm of someone who already knew the outcome, and they'll never forget that. Number 5. You showed them loyalty ain't a life sentence. They thought you'd always stay until you walked out like a final warning they never saw coming. They treated your loyalty like a guarantee, not a gift. Took your patience as permission. Thought you'd always be there, no matter how far they pushed, no matter how many lines they crossed. But you hit them with something their ego never prepared for, a quiet, permanent goodbye. You didn't slam the door, you locked it, and that's what haunts them. People like them think loyalty means slavery, that once you care, you'll tolerate anything. They feed off the idea that love means endurance, endless chances, endless forgiveness, endless explaining. But you drew the line, and not with drama, with clarity. And that kind of ending, it leaves scars. Loyalty ends where self-respect begins. You didn't leave to hurt them. You left to save yourself. Imagine giving someone 1,000 chances, and the moment you finally stop, they panic. Not because they love you, but because they lost control over you. That's the truth. You didn't leave to teach them a lesson. You left because they failed the final one. You realized something dangerous. Loyalty without boundaries becomes self-betrayal. They expected forever. What they got was a wake-up call. And now, every time they think of you, they hear the same sentence in their head. I pushed too far, and they meant it this time. No closure, no grand finale, just one cold truth. You can love someone deeply and still walk away when it starts costing your soul. And that's the chapter they can't rewrite. Number 6. You were the soul they'll never find again. They weren't missing attention. They were starving for the one person who understood their chaos and stayed anyway. Let's get one thing straight. You weren't just someone they talked to. You were the one who translated their silences, who saw past their fake moods, who knew when their anger was fear and when their confidence was just a mask. While others were distracted by their charm, you were locked in on the storm behind their smile, and you held it together. You brought gravity to their madness until the day you walked away. Now, they're surrounded by people yet feel completely alone, because none of those shallow connections can replicate the one thing you gave freely: understanding without judgment. You didn't just see them, you read them, and that kind of emotional intimacy, it doesn't grow on trees, it doesn't come twice. Losing someone who gets you is worse than heartbreak, it's identity collapse. They're out there smiling, partying, posting, pretending. But behind closed doors, they feel hollow because they finally realize what left with you: peace. A peace that wasn't loud, a presence that didn't demand attention, but healed everything just by existing. And now, they're chasing noise to distract from your silence. They're not grieving a relationship. They're grieving the one person who understood them so deeply it scared them. And now that you're gone, they're stuck explaining their soul to people who only understand surface. That's the curse they gave themselves. And the truth they can't unfeel. You weren't just rare, you were real, and real doesn't come back around. Number 7, you snapped the chain they thought would keep you forever. They didn't lose someone. They lost the one thing they thought they'd never have to earn: you. They banked on history, thought because you'd always been there, you'd always stay there. They fed you routines, recycled apologies, lazy affection, and expected loyalty in return. Like just showing up half-heartedly was enough to keep you chained to the same loop. But you broke the damn pattern. No warning, no drama, just growth and exit. See, they confused familiarity with forever. They thought time spent meant control gained. They thought you wouldn't walk away, not after all the years and memories, but you proved something they never saw coming. Comfort doesn't mean commitment, and shared past doesn't equal shared future. Imagine someone treating you like a worn-out couch, comfortable, always there, always waiting, and one day that couch gets up and leaves. That's how rattled they were when you stopped responding, stopped explaining, stopped being available on demand. You shattered the illusion that your presence was permanent, and they haven't recovered since. Familiarity is a trap disguised as safety. You escaped it, and they're still sitting in it. Now every time they think of you, there's a chill that hits. Because you didn't just leave, you reminded them that even the most loyal soul can vanish when taken for granted. And nothing haunts the arrogant like realizing they were never entitled to your loyalty. Just lucky you gave it in the first place. Number 8, you didn't walk away. Life locked the door behind you. They weren't cut off. They were phased out by a frequency they'll never reach again. They wanted to paint it like you ghosted them, like you were bitter or cold. But let's call it what it is. Life upgraded you, and they didn't have the password. This wasn't some petty cut-off. This was a natural disconnection, like oil separating from water. You didn't slam the door. You simply elevated until access was denied. Your energy outgrew the room. Your mind cleared. Your peace stabilized. And when that happens, the universe doesn't ask for permission. It just removes what no longer aligns. They didn't get pushed out. They just couldn't keep up. When you evolve, life doesn't wait for closure. It pulls you forward and lets them choke on your dust. Now they can feel it, that static, that void, like something sacred left the building and isn't coming back. They try to poke at it, test it, see if you'll crack, but nothing connects anymore, because this isn't distance. This is dimensional separation. You didn't block them. Life did, on every level. And now they're stuck in a version of the story that no longer includes you. While you're out here writing chapters, they'll never be invited to read. That's not rejection. That's evolution's way of protecting its chosen ones. And it's permanent. Number 9. You set a standard. They'll spend a lifetime failing to reach. They didn't just lose you. They lost the best treatment they'll ever receive from someone who had every reason to destroy them. Let's make this clear. They didn't deserve the way you held it together, the way you responded with class when chaos would have been justified. You could have exposed them, could have burned the bridge and watched them drown in their lies. But you didn't. You showed restraint, the kind that only real power can deliver. And that's what carved the scar. You gave mercy where they gave manipulation, and that's what breaks them. Imagine handing someone pure gold while they throw dirt back at you. Imagine giving your best to someone who thought they were above gratitude. Now imagine the day they realize what they had after it's gone. That's the movie playing in their mind on repeat. You didn't fight dirty. You walked away clean. No smear campaigns. No revenge. Just distance soaked in dignity. And now every person they meet gets measured against the way you handled them, even at your breaking point. Spoiler alert, no one measures up. They don't miss you because they changed. They miss you because you didn't. You stayed real, even when they deserved fake. That's not weakness, that's immaculate strength, and they'll feel the absence of that grace for the rest of their life. Number 10. You turned their betrayal into your coronation. They planned your collapse, but all they did was hand you the crown. They thought they were delivering your ending, the final blow, the backstab that would leave you shattered. But betrayal doesn't break chosen ones. It builds them. Every knife they shoved in your back, you used it to carve a throne. Every lie they told, you turned it into a lesson. Every fake smile, every disloyal move, you transformed it into fuel, and that's what haunts them. They didn't create your downfall, they created your rise, and now they have to watch it. Imagine trying to ruin someone and accidentally making them untouchable. That's their legacy now. Their betrayal wasn't a weapon, it was a mirror. It showed you who they really were, and who you really are. And once you saw that truth, you leveled up so fast it left their ego spinning. You didn't just survive, you evolved. Stronger, sharper, colder, and the best part, you never had to retaliate. You let your glow-up do the talking. You let your silence become the speech they'll never forget. Now, when they hear your name, it doesn't trigger memories of your pain. It triggers memories of the empire you built right after they left. And nothing's louder than the success they swore you'd never have. You didn't just bounce back. You turned betrayal into your origin story. And that kind of transformation, it's irreversible and unforgettable. Number 11. You weren't replaced. You were removed like a privilege. They didn't lose a person. They lost access to an experience their soul wasn't evolved enough to maintain. They walked like they won, acted like they upgraded, flashed their replacements like trophies. But behind all that noise is one brutal, undeniable truth. You were the rarest thing they ever touched, and now they'll never touch it again. You weren't just love. You were awareness. You were peace in human form. You brought depth where they only knew surface. You brought clarity where they thrived on confusion. And they thought that kind of presence was common. that they could find it again in someone new. But now, every new connection feels like a cheap knockoff of a masterpiece they destroyed by accident. You weren't a phase, you were a frequency, and they're not tuned high enough to reach it anymore. They didn't lose you, they lost access to the most emotionally intelligent, spiritually aligned, unbothered version of you, and that door sealed, shut, permanently. They could be standing right next to you and still feel 1,000 miles away. Because you don't belong to them anymore. You don't explain, you don't react, you don't exist on their level anymore. You weren't erased, you ascended, and now they're choking on the space you used to fill. That's not regret, that's punishment. Number 12, you killed the game by refusing to play. They weren't ready for a checkmate, they were banking on your next move, but you flipped the board and walked away. They lived for the loop. Lie, manipulate, apologize, repeat. It was their comfort zone, their twisted rhythm. They didn't even need to try hard anymore because they thought you'd keep circling back, caught in their emotional spin cycle. But then something happened. You stopped spinning. You didn't scream. You didn't warn them. You just saw the pattern for what it was, a trap dressed up as love. And instead of stepping around it, you burned the whole script. That's what shook them to their core. You didn't just exit, you broke the cycle into pieces they can't reassemble. Nothing unsettles a manipulator more than the silence of a target who's finally done. Imagine a puppeteer reaching for strings that no longer exist. That's them now, flailing, lost, trying to trigger a reaction out of thin air. But you're gone. Not just physically, energetically, emotionally, mentally, gone. And the game, dead in the water. They weren't addicted to love, they were addicted to control. And you took it back, quietly, permanently, unapologetically. Now, where their power used to live, there's just echoing silence. And nothing haunts like silence from someone who used to explain everything. You didn't just leave the cycle, you ended it, and they'll keep spinning. Alone. Number 13. Your silence made their chaos. Deafening. They didn't know your calm was the glue until everything shattered in your absence. They used to mock your quiet, roll their eyes at your stillness, call you boring, too sensitive, too soft. But here's the truth they choke on now. You weren't soft, you were stable. You were the calm force holding back the flood. And the second you left, the dam broke. Every demon they kept tucked away came crashing out, loud, uncontrolled, unavoidable. They used your presence like a lid on their chaos. You were the peace in their war zone, the pause between their storms. But peace is a privilege, not a right. And once you took that back, they had to sit with the noise they were always trying to outrun. You weren't their peace, you were their anchor. And when you pulled it, they drifted into their own storm. Imagine a room full of ticking clocks, none in sync. That's their life now, unbalanced, no rhythm, no center. And every second without you is a reminder that they were only ever stable because you were there. That's what stings the most. You didn't just walk out, you removed the silence they were borrowing from you. They thought you were the background. Turns out, you were the foundation. Now everything's crumbling, and you're not coming back to hold it up. Number 14, you ended the game before they knew it started. They thought they were playing you, but every move they made was one you already counted on. They believed they had control, believed they were 2 steps ahead, believed you were just another piece on the board. But here's what they didn't see. You were never in the game. You were above it, watching, calculating, learning. You weren't reacting, you were predicting. And every fake apology, every guilt trip, every power move, you let it happen because you already knew how it would end. They thought you were emotional, but you were tactical. They thought you'd chase. You were building distance. They thought you were stuck. You were positioning, and then, in one final act of precision, you walked away. No tears, no announcement, just checkmate. The real master doesn't need to flip the board. They just disappear, leaving the opponent confused and defeated. Imagine playing chess with someone who smiles through every piece you take, then leans in and says, "It's already over." That's what you did. You let them feel smart, powerful, in control, until they looked up and realized you weren't even playing anymore, and they were still losing. That's why they can't forget you. You didn't just exit, you ended the entire illusion. And now, they're stuck obsessing over a board you left clean with one final move that proved you never played to win their game, you played to end it. Number 15. You were the ending they'll keep trying to rewrite. You didn't just walk out, you ended the story in a way they never saw coming, and now they're stuck rereading the final chapter like it'll change. There's a truth burning through their mind every time they think of you. They'll never escape what you became in their life. You weren't just a relationship, a phase, a lesson. You were the mirror, the wake-up call, the one who saw everything and still chose peace over proving. That haunts them more than any argument ever could. You didn't fight for closure. You became it. You didn't try to expose them. You outgrew them. And that kind of silent power, it etches itself into memory like a scar you can't scrub off. You weren't part of their story. You were the last page, the chapter that closed the book. Every move you made, every boundary you held, every calm step back, it left a mark. They can't unfeel the shift, can't deny the upgrade, can't copy the level you operate on. You were rare, unrepeatable, and now that you're gone, they're stuck chasing echoes in places you'll never return to. You weren't just hard to forget, you became unforgettable by design. Because you weren't loud, you were exact. And your absence isn't silence, it's checkmate, final, permanent, and carved into their soul like a verdict that can't be appealed. Number 16, they had front row seats to your glow-up and still fumbled it. They didn't lose you by accident. They watched you rise and still chose ego over evolution. They saw it all, the effort, the depth, the vision. You didn't hide your light. You didn't play small. You gave them access to everything, your thoughts, your peace, your plans. And what did they do with it? They gambled it away for short-term control, fake power, or attention from people who don't even know them. They weren't blindsided, they weren't confused. They had a front row seat to greatness and still clowned around like it was a game. But now the curtain's closed. The glow-up they once had backstage access to? They're watching it from the cheap seats, and it's killing them. You became everything they thought you couldn't, and nothing they'll ever touch again. They thought you'd peak with them, that without their validation, you'd shrink. But the real show started after they left. You didn't just level up, you ascended. And now your presence, your clarity, your silence, it's premium. VIP only. And their name's not on the list. They're stuck watching your transformation through pixelated memories, trying to pretend they don't miss what they never deserved. But deep down, they know the truth. You weren't the problem. You were the preview of a life they weren't built to handle. And now, they lost the ticket, forever. Number 17, they wanted control, but you gave them consequences. They played the game too long and forgot the house always wins. They didn't want a relationship. They wanted a throne. someone to control, bend, manipulate. They weren't after connection, they were after compliance. But then came the twist. You were never theirs to rule. You were the lesson they thought they were too clever to learn. At first, you gave them grace, room to change, space to grow. But every apology came with a lie. Every comeback came with a trap, until you had enough. And you didn't scream. You didn't fight. You just made a decision that hit like a guillotine. This ends now. You weren't cold. You were done. And that's a different kind of silence. They wanted the upper hand, but all they got was karma in real time, because you stopped playing, you stopped explaining, and when you left everything, the chaos, the drama, the mind games, behind. You weren't emotional, you were finished, and now they're sitting in the ruins of the castle they built with lies, wondering why the roof caved in. They expected forgiveness to be your default setting, but instead you gave them something colder, consequences, and not the kind they could talk their way out of, the kind that comes with no second chance. You didn't destroy them, you just let them feel life without your protection, and now they're realizing losing control over you meant losing control over everything. Number 18, they can't heal because you were the cure. They confused the medicine with the wound, and now they're bleeding without you. They ran from you thinking you were the problem, that your depth was too much, that your love came with expectations, but you weren't overwhelming, you were healing. And the only reason it felt heavy is because they were never ready to face their own sickness. You didn't bring drama, you brought clarity. You didn't expose their flaws, you understood them. You didn't break them. You refused to keep enabling their brokenness. And that, right there, was the trigger. Because once you started making them look inward, they panicked. It's easier to call you the villain than admit you were the only thing keeping them from drowning. Now, without you, they're unraveling, slowly, quietly. The void left by your absence is loud, not because of missing attention, but because no one else gets them like you did. No one else stays after seeing the mess. And you did, until you couldn't anymore. Every connection since you feels flat, forced, plastic, because they're trying to recreate a bond that wasn't based on surface, it was based on soul, and you don't just find that in the next person, you earn it, and they never did. They're not heartbroken, they're exposed, because now they know you weren't the storm. You were the medicine they spat out, and now the sickness is all they have left. Number 19, you became the reminder that they'll never find better. They tried to replace you. Now they're stuck with people who make them miss what they mocked. They thought you were easy to find again, that another version of you was waiting around the corner. But here's the truth, you're not a template. You're a one-time phenomenon. You were rare energy, real presence, deep understanding. And now that you're gone, everything feels flat. Every new face they meet gets silently compared to you. And every time, that face fails. Because while they're trying to bond with surface-level connections, your depth haunts them like a song stuck in their head. You weren't just hard to replace. You made replacement feel like punishment. They mocked your standards when they had you, called you intense, said you expected too much. But now they're out there begging for half the loyalty you gave for free, every time they see a watered-down version of what they used to have. They choke on the truth. You didn't walk away. They lost their best, thinking it was average. Imagine having access to a rare jewel and trading it for costume jewelry. Now they're stuck flashing fakes while remembering the real thing, and the weight of that realization. It's crushing. You didn't become unforgettable by accident. You became unforgettable by being irreplaceable. And now, they live in a world where better doesn't exist anymore. And now, here we are, at the edge of the story they can't rewrite and you can't forget. You didn't just survive what they did, you outclassed it. You left the board clean, the silence loud, and the lesson unforgettable. That's what makes you the checkmate they'll never recover from. If this message hit where it was supposed to, drop 77 in the comments. Hit that like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to remember who the hell they are. This was for the chosen ones. And trust me, they felt it.